Introducing the African Diaspora News Channel app, your gateway to stories that's overlooked by the corporate mainstream media.
And we serve as the voice to the global Black community.
Again, we got Dr. Candace Matthews.
A lot of these documents, looking at.
We are committed to informing and educating through the power of media.
This country is supposed to be about the land of the free for all. It has not been free for Black people, and we are tired.
With our platform, we're helping to end injustice by exposing it.
Join us in standing for excellence in journalism and serving our community. Download the African Diaspora News app today.
Go back to Zimbabwe. Those were the words of Leanne Manas, a white female telling a Black Zimbabwean immigrant to leave South Africa and go back home to Zimbabwe. Hello, my name is Reneilwe Morema, and I am your host right here on the African Diaspora News channel, reporting live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Recently, an interview on the SABC Good Morning show with Leanne Manas featuring Rutendo Matinyarare sparked a racial debate on social media. The interview, which was aired 4 years ago, highlighted the stark contrast between the treatment of Zimbabwean foreigners and white Europeans in South Africa. It is no secret that Zimbabwean immigrants in South Africa are often subjected to discrimination and xenophobia. They are accused of taking jobs, contributing to the high crime rate, and stealing resources from South African citizens, amongst other atrocious things. The contrast between the treatment of Zimbabwean immigrants and white Europeans in South Africa was striking in the interview. Rutendo pointed out that white Europeans are often treated with more respect and are presented with more opportunities than Zimbabweans, even though they are also foreigners and they are both outsiders.
Opportunities. Why don't they take up the opportunity? In fact, why don't you take up the opportunity? Why would you come and make your fortune here in South Africa? You could be making a fortune in Zimbabwe. Why are you here?
Because I'm part of the problem in Zimbabwe. My attitude of thinking that I had to come and take up the opportunity that was offered to me here.
So why don't you go
instead
home?
of minding
May
land.
I ask you that? Why do you not
I am
go
going home. But
Are
right
you?
now I've also got family in South Africa. I've got South African children, and those South African children don't just allow me to just stand up and leave, but I do have projects that I'm taking part in Zimbabwe because I've learned that those resources are the most important thing.
If you have such faith in your country, in Zimbabwe, I would say and I would think you would get up and you would take your family and you would go and fix up the future of Zimbabwe. If you're saying there's land, if you're saying there's minerals, if you're saying there is so much wealth and opportunities for you there, you're living a contradiction.
No, I'm not living a contradiction.
You certainly are. By sitting here, you're living a contradiction.
Because
people are suffering in Zimbabwe.
So why are people
but you're
not
languishing
why
here.
are people not going to the Netherlands? Why are Germans not going back to Germany? Is it because their countries are bad? Is it because they're running away from problems in the UK or in the States? Why aren't Europeans going? What are you doing here?
I live here. This is my home. I'm not running away from it.
Why are you living here instead
There's
of Europe?
great
Why did your
opportunities and I
great-grandparents
love
come
this
here instead
country.
of Europe?
We're not talking about grandparents. We're talking about me.
No,
We're talking about
you've
you.
made it sound like a Zimbabwean needs to go back to Zimbabwe to show that Zimbabwe is working. So why are Europeans not going back to Europe? Why are Asians not going back to Asia? Why are they staying in South Africa?
The context of the conversation is that you're saying that Zimbabwe is a beautiful country with great opportunities and people have run away from there to become waiters. The context is you are living here in South Africa when you could be going back and making that country work. That's the
But you
context.
also forgot that I was asked to come here. Somebody thought my skills were important here.
I've been asked to go to other countries, but I believe in this country.
But why don't you believe in Europe?
No, I believe in South Africa.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
I believe in my country.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
This double standard is a clear example of the deep-seated racial prejudice that continued to plague South African society. While many South Africans claim to be against racism and discrimination, this interview shows that there is a long way to go before equality can be achieved. The social media response to the interview were alarming, to say the least. Some were sympathizing with Rutendo and the Zimbabwean immigrants, and others defending the treatment of white Europeans, and even going as far as cheering Leanne on for defending South Africans against these Zimbabweans. These are just some of the comments that I have read on X and on TikTok. To a certain extent, I can agree that white Europeans are treated with more respect than immigrants from Zimbabwe or Nigeria or other African countries. And this is mainly because of political ties and the media. Number one, colonial legacy is part of our history. It has a long-lasting impact, and it includes racial hierarchies and stereotypes that are further fueled by mainstream media. Media always perpetuate negative stereotypes about African people, which can influence how we perceive and treat them. And the government does not make it easier because they will always prioritize relations and policies favoring European countries, leading to better treatment of European citizens in South Africa. Because we all know where the funding is coming from. We all know who really governs these African countries behind closed doors. We all know who owns the land. We all know why we have an unequal state. And we all know the odds will always favor the minority. So I am not surprised that a journalist like Leanne Manas and a big broadcasting station like the SABC, who is under the code of conduct that clearly stipulates that it shall not promote or glamorize violence or unlawful conduct based on race, nationality, or ethnic origin. They will break the code of conduct just to prove how this country favors white European descendants without consequences. And if we're being practical, both of them are foreigners. I think Africans, or should I say, the sons of the soil, are welcome everywhere in Africa. Their umbilical cord was buried on our land, and therefore, Africa is their home. So Africa is your home, and it is crazy how someone whose DNA does not have the genetic markups of Africans can dictate how an African should move in their own continent. Leanne should accept her history and her heritage. Her heritage is that of the colonizer. Her bloodline is not from Africa. Yes, she was born here and she is South African, and good for her for defending her home, but she must not make herself a dictator of how we should move in our own continent. A continent that is essentially our birthright. There is a difference between being born here and being from here. Now, that is me defending my African brothers and sisters, but I do not tolerate their mischief and whatever they do that can cause harm to the South African citizens. No, 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 I do not support that. You do not get a free pass into this country because you are African and we share the same genetic markings and skin color. Wrong is wrong, and I believe in the power of consequence, and the laws that govern us must be respected regardless of who you are or where you come from. There was a time Rutendo went out of line. His intentions for South African citizens were questionable. How he is treating us is questionable. He is a threat, and I call for his deportation. And here is why I think Rutendo should be deported back to Zimbabwe. Check out this video.
I love women. In fact, I love them so much that I don't know how to control myself around them. I have been seduced by 16-year-olds. So a child has just gone out of maturity. They come as a little gang to visit Ubudi in the complex. And then they seduce you. And when you're supposed to say no, you don't say no. I've been there.
Now, this is a man that says he can't differentiate between a grown woman and a 16-year-old. He can't say no to the advances of a 16-year-old because he lacks the capacity to know what is right and what is wrong. He can't control himself. People on Twitter were outraged, calling him out, but he was so adamant that pedophilia is part of who he is. Now, looking at the history of gender-based violence in South Africa, women dying at the hands of men every week, South Africa having the highest crime rate and rape rate in the world, can we afford to have him in our country knowing what kind of a person he is? I think not. The government and the Home Affairs should probe into this man. South Africa cannot afford to have a self-proclaimed pedophile around our citizens given the circumstances of our country. So yes, I do call for his deportation. I will not stand for anyone that can potentially cause harm to the citizens of South Africa. Am I defending his actions? No. But am I defending his right to travel Africa or to travel to whatever country that he sees fit? Of course I am. Of course I am. Do I think what Leanne did was right? No. So, you know what? People like Rutendo really do make me question the type of children he is potentially raising. He's a father, but he comes on a public platform and says that he can't control himself around ladies, that we are essentially a man's oyster. We are there for the taking. I do not condone that, and I think, like I said, the government and the Home Affairs should look into this man's citizen status. And yeah, if he's here illegally, he needs to be deported back home. Do I stand with what Leanne did? No, I do not stand with what Leanne did, because at the end of the day, Africa is for Africans. What do you think about this segment? Don't forget to comment to us in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and share the broadcast, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss these groundbreaking conversations right here on the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Reneilwe Morema. It has been an absolute pleasure.